What's up guys, RussLyman here. In today's DIY video, I'm going to show you how I took this 8bitdo controller and made it into a Sailor Moon controller.
Russ, what you doing? Russ, what you doing? Russ, what you doing? Let's find out!
8bitdo, or 8bitdo, however you want to say it, puts out some pretty awesome Bluetooth controllers. This one kind of mimics the Super Nintendo. They have a version without the longer grips, but the person that sent me this enjoyed this one better. And this is how it looks normally. It's got that gray and purple color scheme, but we're going to be taking it apart and customizing it. So first thing is to get the shell off. Now it does have 2 screws on each grip, so we need to take those off, and then we're going to take the battery out and take the sticker and peel it back just a little bit to access 2 more screws in order to take the shell apart. Now once that's apart, it's just a matter of pulling the controller apart. It actually snaps together with clips, so getting it to let go, you just have to pry at it and work it until it pops off. And once you got it open, it's a pretty clean setup. It's split up on both halves there, so you just need to remove the screws on each portion in order to pull the guts apart. Then it's just taking the rubber membranes and buttons out on one side and tackling the rest of the screws to remove the analog sticks and the rumble motors. Now the Z and R buttons actually snap apart, so you can pull them out of the shell. So you're just gonna have to pry up on each of them and they'll eventually pop off, making them easier to take out. After that was done, I actually took the controller and scanned it, so I had an image of the controller so I can design the decals that were gonna go on top of it. Unfortunately, because of the longer grips, I couldn't get a good image with the lid down, so I actually had to take like a blanket to block out some of the light so I could get a better scan of the image. Now I did a mock-up of kind of what I want to go for here. This is just a stock picture of the controller. You know, Sailor Moon over here in the corner. Maybe paint this star here yellow and have the cap. And then I'm going to be adding a gem, an actual gem, and then make this part with some clay. That will work. And basically we're just doing this for a size reference to know how big to make these when we're going to be printing them, so I don't overprint it. So that'll replace the 8bitdo logo there. I gotta be a little smaller. So basically now what we do, we have our layout of the 3 decals, and this is to scale. We would just hide the layer like this and then print it on our sticker paper. So these are all the decals I would be printing to put on the controller. Alright guys, I'm going to use my Apoxy Sculpt A and B putty that's going to harden so I can modify the front face of this controller. I got a little ruby right here that I want to embed into the controller, kind of mimicking Sailor Moon's tiara there. So we're going to mix this together equal parts. Definitely want to use some gloves because stuff gets messy. So let's get into it. So again, just getting placement where I wanted to kind of put the ruby and have the bands go like the crown on the controller. So we had to mix up our Apoxy Sculpt and get sculpting. And this stuff is pretty easy to work with. I had some gloves on because the version that I got is actually black in its color, so it gets pretty messy. But you can mold it using tools, and if you wet your finger a little bit and rub it on the Apoxy Sculpt, you can smooth it out so it doesn't have that rough look to it. And just using a sharp X-Acto knife, I could cut away where I didn't want the Apoxy Sculpt. And after 24 hours, this stuff hardens, and you can go back with some sandpaper. I'm just using 120 grit sandpaper here to kind of level everything out. And wrapping it around a foam block gives you a nice flat surface, so this way you don't have any bumps and curves when you're block sanding essentially on the controller. And then just go back again with a sharp X-Acto knife to do any cleanup. I want to make sure there's no clay where the D-pad is or the buttons, so I just go in there and kind of scrape it away. and making sure the ruby still fits in the spot. You can always go back and trim off a little bit if you needed to get a tighter fit on it. And then I just wanted to rough up the exterior of the controller so the paint has something to stick to. So we're using 220 grit on here just to get a little bit more surface area for the paint to grab to. Now going through the controller, I actually forgot to take out some parts that are clear acrylic in there, and we don't want to paint over those. So there's a little LED light that lights up when the controller is paired, and that piece is on the bottom portion of the controller here. So I went in with my X-Acto knife and kind of pried it off until it popped off. And then again, on the top of the controller, there was another acrylic piece that would light up. So again, I just used the X-Acto knife and went in there and made sure I could take it out. And since I'll be painting the shoulder buttons and the A, B, X, and Y buttons, I hit them with some sandpaper as well. Once everything was sanded down and cleaned, I organized it on pieces of cardboard and wrote what color I'll be painting them. It's great to stay organized so that you don't get out to the paint booth and then you forget what color is going on what part. So I just wrote on there with marker, and this way it was a lot easier to keep track of. And the paints that I'm using are a paint primer combo, so I don't need to put a primer base coat down. But again, I do want to put light coats so it comes out smooth. You put your first coat on light, wait about 10 or 15 minutes in between each coat. Usually I do about 3 coats for the base coat. Well, it appears I lost the footage of me actually putting the decals onto the controller, but basically I just cut them out with an X-Acto knife and laid them on. They have a sticky back and a clear backing. The only downside using these stickers here is they only show up really good on white surfaces behind it. If I was going to put it on the blue portion of the controller, you wouldn't see the colors pop out. I do maybe want to look into water slide decals. I've seen lots of other people use those and they seem to pop a little bit better. But with the decals on, now I can paint the band itself. I was trying to go for an actual gold, and I painted that, and it looked a little off. Looking at some reference pictures, it was more of a yellow color, so I went back again with some acrylic paints. These are just cheap paints you can get at any craft store, and I painted it a more yellow orangey color, I guess you would say. And to help speed up the drying process, I just hit it with a heat gun in between coats. I did a few coats to get the coverage I was looking for. Now once that had dried, I did go back to the paint booth and added some clear coat to it. I used Rust-Oleum Crystal Clear, and it was the same process as the base coat. I did do a lot more coats on this though. I probably did 5 to 7 coats just to get a nice buildup to go over the stickers that I laid down. I did have some trouble now putting the ruby back into the spot that I had carved out, so I went back with my X-Acto blade and just carved around. I also wanted to remove the paint that had gotten there, so when I glue down the ruby, it's gluing straight to the epoxy sculpt and not the paint itself, so just it had a tighter bond that way. And then it just popped in perfectly, so we were on to glue it, and I was just using some crazy glue to glue it down. Then it was just putting all the buttons back in, the rubber membranes, and to make sure to put those acrylic pieces that I took out so the LEDs will light up. And then it's just a reverse process of the disassemble, putting the boards back in, the analog sticks and rumble motors, and screwing everything back together. Surprisingly, this is pretty easy to disassemble and put back together. A lot of the components are kind of contained together in pieces, so there's not a whole lot of stuff you can mess up. In putting the shell back together, you want to make sure it snaps tightly. This is a great design in it because it pulls the shell all together. Only having the 4 screws that tighten it together help, but having those snap clips really pull the shell back together and make it a tight fit. I did run into a little issue with the battery compartment. Having the paint on both surfaces, it was a little bit difficult to pull the battery cover off, so I did go back and scrape a little bit of the paint off, and I did add some wax to it. This way it was just easier to slide that cover off. You essentially, once you put the battery in, you don't really have to take it off because it's chargeable. So it's not 100% necessary, but in case you wanted to put AA batteries in there, which work as well, that option was there. And then I did take some wax as well and wax the outside of the controller. This helps with the shine of it and gives it another protective coat when you're holding it in your hand. And overall just gives the controller a great appearance. It really shines. So let's check out that final result. Well, that's it, guys. That's the Sailor Moon themed 8bitdo controller. I think it came out really awesome. Tied the theme together with her crown and the ruby. It really pops off that white color. And as you can see, it connects to my Switch great, and you're able to play games wirelessly. This will also connect to your computer if you want it, so you can play games on Steam. Pretty much anything that would accept Bluetooth. Or 8bitdo does sell dongles that plug into certain systems that will connect to these controllers as well, so it's making it very convenient. Taking it from a basic controller just like this with the plain Super Nintendo scheme and turning it into this Sailor Moon themed controller. Let me know what you guys think, how it turned out. Do you like this style? It's more of a clean look as well. Usually I do love the weathering on the controller, but we decided to keep it clean with this one. I can't wait to do more controllers in the future. I have a lot of Nintendo controllers set up, as well as a Super Nintendo controller that I'll be making as well. So consider subscribing so you don't miss those videos. If you guys do want to check out other controller builds, there'll be a playlist in the description down below or above for your convenience. Thanks again for watching, guys. As always, I'm RussLyman, and keep your world fun bit by bit. I'll see you next video.
And I want to give a super shout out to all my Patreon supporters: Dan Buchanan, Joey Ellis, George Sandoval, Joseph Riviera, Nintendo, Joe Sheevy, David Apuzzo, Maynard, Brian Culpepper, TechWizX, Matthew Hannigan, Alex Kaz, Ian Oshie, Amanda Bartlett, Gannon, and all my Patreon supporters. Link below if you want to join, and I'll see you later.